So I want to talk about building wealth. I think that is really important, and we all should focus on that in terms of building wealth in our life. I think we should at least have enough that we should live on when we are in retirement, and perhaps a little, not a lot, but a little bit to pass on to folks once you're dead, right? Like that's going to happen, and you probably want to choose who you want to pass on to, just to be nice. But I'm not saying like a heck of a lot. I'm just saying whatever would be a nice little gift. But this is actually really hard to do for most people. Behaviorally, it's very difficult to do this. But I want to talk about, what is the simplest way to do this? And I know you probably have heard a lot of this before, but some of you haven't, so I'm going to repeat it. So if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massack. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor for to help you out. Again, like I'm not an investment professional, all of that kind of stuff. See a professional. But, the basic understanding that we want to do, I want to actually have you build wealth and do well in your life, because then, at some point, maybe you'll come back and say, hey, you're that person that told me what to do. And it's actually super easy in terms of building. The recipe is very easy. It's getting out of debt and focusing all of your effort to get out of debt as quick as you possibly can at the moment. Then, thinking about having plans to prevent, catastrophic things from taking away your wealth that you accumulate. So having, life insurance should be right at the get-go. Having, disability insurance, those are the two big things when you're older. Long-term care insurance when you're older, much older. Looking at how do you have an emergency fund, right? So I'm big, so if you listen to Dave Ramsey, this is very similar to exactly what he would say. There's only a few adjustments that I would do. Have $1,000 emergency fund, right? Like walk up those baby steps, as he calls them. And then, once you're out of debt, then you can start building up your emergency fund to, 4 to 6 months of your living expenses. It's actually not as much as you think it's going to be. So, a pot of money, just in case things go out south, right? And that's really what it is. And then after that, it's actually pretty easy, where you save 10 to 20% of the total income that you bring in. So whatever you bring in, save 10 to 20%. So we do 15. I think we actually do about 20. My wife and I, but effectively we're trying to aim for 15. We always end up going a little bit more. And that's really it at the end of the day. That is going to build you a tremendous amount of wealth. Oh, and the savings, that's the other thing. So just saving alone is going to build you a lot of wealth. You can dump that into like a savings account if you want to. Wouldn't recommend it. What I would recommend is just investing broadly in index funds or really good mutual funds. And that's where I differ significantly from Dave Ramsey. The reason why I invest in mutual funds is because that's what's offered to me at work, and that's what I have to do, and that's going to be like looking at the best possible ones you can get. But you can also invest in index funds broadly, like just all of the companies that are in the stock market. And you just do that day in and day out, over and over and over again until, and I wouldn't we don't invest in property. We don't do any of that kind of stuff because it actually doesn't have very good returns if you look at that repeatedly. And it's hard to get very good returns, even if you so if you listen to Dave Ramsey, I was a avid fan for a long time, until he started, his political views just got too much for me. And if you listen to what he says, it's the exact same thing, except for, the buying property. If you listen to what he says, you have to look at like 500 pieces of property by the time you actually get a deal on something. And that's true, right? And I don't think that that's worth my time and effort and money. I don't think it's worth most people's time and effort and money. It's hard to find property that's undervalued, that you will do well in, extremely hard. So we just, we pay off our house. We focus on just living a good life. We don't have fancy cars, although now we're getting to the point where we can get better, fancier cars, but we live without cable. We lived without sort of TV, all that kind of stuff for a very long time. We cook all of our meals. Now we eat out a little bit more, but it doesn't matter to us in terms of the finances and stuff. But for many, many, many years, my wife and I got married when we were 25. So even before that, when I started living with my parents, when I moved away, I was 19 when I moved away and went to university. I lived very, very meagerly for a long time. In college, I would just eat like rice and beans. It's literally what I would eat. My thing was frozen peas and rice and some hummus. So I was able to live very poorly, but I survived, right? Like, you get through these things. And my one outlet, my one thing that I loved to do and I spent money on was going to the gym. And that was kind of like my thing. Although I don't do that now, I spend money on a master swimming class. But that's it, right? Like, that's pretty meager in terms of what happens now that we've done that for 20 years. We've accumulated enough wealth that I feel like we can go on vacations and do whatever we want. Like, as Dave Ramsey says, you live like nobody else, so you can live and give like nobody else later on, right? Like, that's the important thing, is really focusing on living meagerly for a long time so that you eventually have a pretty good life and you build some wealth after that. It's a stepping stone, and what you have to remember, and this is the hardest thing, is when you're 20 years old and you're looking around and people have like nice cars, they have nice things, they do not afford that. At the end of the day, even today, now that we're older, I'm 42 years old, I look around all the other people that are 42 years old and I look at their sort of fancy cars and, nice houses and stuff. Most people cannot afford those things. Most people are not doing very well to actually be in that position. Now, you might think like, oh, who is this person to say he's a professor? He's got all this money, a business professor. Wait a minute. That was an endogenous choice. Like, you have to remember that, right? Like, I actively chose, through thinking through this very wisely, to go into a business program and do a PhD. In fact, my PhD itself and being a business professor is not going to pan out until I'm about 52 to 55 years old, when I break even compared to what I would have made as an engineer without getting that education. And I've done this calculation several times, and it's bang on. It's about at 52 to 55 years old, it's a break even. So which means I'm still at a loss at this point, at 42 years old, of doing this degree. So, and having this career. But does that mean I'm not, doing better than, a lot of people with this? Yeah, because we live very meagerly. There's this person, I don't know if you've ever seen him or heard about him, Mr. Money Mustache, on the internet, lived extremely meagerly as an engineer. Again, it was an active choice to become an engineer, right? People do not, it's a hard career, hard to get into, super hard, right? Very, very hard to do these things, but you work your butt off and you forego a lot of parties. I did not. My undergraduate career was considered of studying all the time. That's what I did. I studied. We went to the library. My romantic time with my wife on a Friday night was going to the library and studying until about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and then we'd go home and watch a movie together. That was our fun time. That is all we did. And every weekend we would spend 10 hours, 12 hours, 13 hours on a Saturday and do the same thing on a Sunday of studying repeatedly. And maybe on Sunday night, I usually took a little bit of time off to watch The Simpsons. And that was it. That was my life. You can ask all of my friends, you can ask all of my relatives, and that was the life. But you do that because then it sets you going forward, right? You are doing something that's painful right now. It sucks. But you do it right now so it sets you going forward, and you don't have to worry as much as you get older. And you do that for 20 years, and all these little sacrifices over and over and over again, it actually adds up, right? It adds up, and you don't think about it at the time that this is painful. It's right now. I'm investing in this reciprocity project. I think it's going to add a lot of value to a lot of people's life. And so why am I doing it? Because I think it's going to add a lot of value into a lot of people's life. And then I think it's going to be a really cool project by the time it's done. But it's taking an awful lot of work. You don't see a lot of people doing this day in and day out. But I'm doing it because I think that there's value there. And you have to remember this. This isn't what's called an endogenous choice. I am actively choosing to do this despite the fact that everybody else thinks it's like some other thing that's going on, right? And that makes a big difference in understanding what's going on. This is one of the harder things to disentangle in science, is these endogenous choices. So to build wealth, simply just work at it. Forgo all of the sort of easy things that you think are easy and fun right now for benefit in the future. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.